Going live with another one of my co-authors. Her name is Dr. Ericha Scott, and she's going to talk all about how art and art therapy saved her life. So let me just invite her to join us really quick. Ericha Scott. There she is. Art Speaks Out. So Ericha and I are both authors in this Believe Beyond book, and we're both sharing our stories. Hers is really special, and it really jumped out to me. If you saw my stories, you saw that something on her website. It was like if you have early intervention, early exposure to art and art therapy, like right after a traumatic event, it reduces your risk of PTSD significantly. Oh, Ericha,
Hi.
hello. Hey, are you
Well,
able to rotate your
I
phone at all?
think so.
Okay,
Hold
perfect.
on.
There she is.
Okay.
Yes, love it.
And let me adjust it a little more.
Yeah, you bet.
Okay. I not used to doing this on Instagram.
That is okay. We can do new things, and I appreciate you being flexible because I'm just an Instagram girl through and through.
That's good.
Yeah. So just before you hopped on, I was talking about, you said art saved your life. And I love that, the story that I shared that I tagged you in and you reshared it, about early intervention with art therapy reduces PTSD significantly. I think it's at 80% on your website. And obviously I know art is, it's an important part of a balanced life, but I just had no idea it could have these types of impacts. Oh, Shayna's on. She's one of our co-authors too. Okay, good. Thanks,
Oh,
Shayna, for being
wow.
here. Yeah.
That's very nice. So, so yes. Did you tell the story or
I
should I
didn't
repeat
tell
it
the
or
story. Why
okay.
don't you start off by talking about, just say like your name, and then you have a bunch of letters behind your name, and I'm not gonna do it justice. So can you just tell us those? Like, I know you worked really hard to get those letters behind your name. So tell
Thank
us what those
you.
are all about.
Okay, so one of the advantages of being my age, which is 70, is that you have time to accrue all of those credentials. But I'm a licensed professional clinical counselor, and I have a private practice in Malibu. I, just as of last year, no longer see weekly clients. I only do creative arts intensives. And part of why I do that is I love it and it's so powerful. People come in to work with me 4 hours a day from 2 days up to 2 weeks.
Wow.
So, and it can be even just 2 days can be life changing.
Yeah.
There's something about sitting with one person, making art, I also do sand play, Jungian sand play therapy.
Okay.
And so there's something about engaging the visual, the kinesthetic movement, touch, sensations that reach deep into a person and help bypass cognitive defenses and denial and gently help us face the mirror.
Mm-hmm.
So even when we're not doing literal self-portraits, everything in art is a form of a self-portrait
Okay.
about life or self or trauma. And so I heard recently that someone that came to see me last year went back to his or her therapist and said, I don't know what she did, that voodoo. I don't know what that art voodoo was, but it really helped
Yeah.
me. And so I do try to speak to the science of it
Sure.
because there are wonderful ways that art, when directed by an art therapist, engage the brain and the neurology of the brain. So, for example, childhood trauma damages the corpus callosum,
Mm-hmm.
but using the corpus callosum heals it. So there are any form of art, but especially certain targeted art exercises help you use your corpus callosum, crossing back and forth. And it's like an internal EMDR. It
Okay.
helps
What do you mean when you say EMDR? I don't know what that is.
So EMDR is rapid eye movement
Ah,
desensitization. You've probably heard about it. Everybody's heard about it. About the you move your eyes back and forth, and that helps you resolve trauma.
wow.
It seems kind of silly when you say it like that, but by making art, you're doing that internally
Mm-hmm.
to paint, to draw, to sculpt, and using both hands. And so it's really exciting. I've been I've never doubted the power of art because of my childhood experience. I
Mm-hmm.
was born that my chapter is about this. That I was my mom didn't know she was pregnant. She drank the first 7 weeks of my fetal development. And fortunately, she stopped when she realized she was pregnant, but it still had an impact. What we find is there's a genetic differential on how fetuses respond to alcohol in the womb. Fraternal twins can have a completely different response to exposure to alcohol.
Dang.
Isn't that interesting? I know,
Yeah.
right? So, um, I apparently had some vulnerabilities, and so I was born with like a mild cleft palate. I was born with some little. We have gills in the fetal development, and they usually are reabsorbed. And but when there's a trauma, which alcohol would be, because it's a tetragen, it's a poison. So I still have my little gills. So I had those removed. But that's not an uncommon response to exposure in the womb.
Mm-hmm.
And so while I didn't warrant the full diagnosis of fetal alcohol syndrome, I definitely had fetal alcohol effects.
Okay.
And so I was failing fourth grade for the second time when my teacher, who was brilliant, turned to my mom and in a very droll voice said, she likes art. Why don't you get her an art teacher? And my mom normally wouldn't have followed up on that, but she did. She hired a beatnik, pre-hippie beatnik. He had a beret and a gold earring, and he wore jeans and flip-flops. I'd never seen anyone like that in my life before. I was um, I was in awe of long hair and a gold earring. I was fascinated. And so he was my art teacher for a year, maybe 18 months, private lessons.
Mm-hmm.
And he taught me how to paint in oil
Wow.
paints. And so after a year or maybe a year and a half, I was retested and I went from failing fourth grade to reading college level from just
Wow.
not even art therapy, just art
Yeah.
classes. And so
Wow.
I think it art helps on so many levels. It helps. I watch it help clients in rehab with motivation. There is some evidence based on research that when art therapy is part of the process of group process, that clients are more likely to stay in treatment until their treatment goals are met.
Wow.
I mean, that's like,
Wow.
and it was sort of a sidebar on some research that was focusing on something else. I was like, oh my God, this is really important, right?
Yes. Oh my gosh. Wow.
So that means a higher success rate. And in fact, in two different hospitals, when I was offering primary groups, or I was the lead of I guess the best way I can call it is primary group, my the results of the people in my group were better than anyone else in the hospital.
Wow.
And I don't think it's because I'm a genius. I think it's because I always use art, whether it was, and not just visual, but visual for sure, but journal writing and like either chair work or psychodrama or soliloquies, even whatever seemed to happen or need to happen in the moment. And, um, and so that happened in one hospital that had 200 beds.
Okay.
And my clients had the lowest relapse rate of any other group, and I had the least experience.
Wow.
And then in the other hospital, 20 years later, was over 100 beds, and the psychologist came to me. He was doing Beck tests, which are they're it's a self questionnaire. It's self-administered, but considered reliable and valid. So he was offering Beck tests before treatment and after, or right at the end of treatment. And he said, look at these scores. He said, no one's getting these scores. And there's something about art and community too that seems to deepen the community bond and connection.
Mm-hmm.
Well, that's really important when you have a treatment group trying to heal together.
Yeah.
And so so it was hard getting that group going because I expected them to do work outside of group.
Mm-hmm.
And that took it was a power struggle for a couple of months. But then once it was set up, the group members would encourage new group members to do the art. They would say, you've got to do it. If you want to get well, you've got to do this. You should see, you can't believe what difference it makes.
Wow.
And so I would have people at the very last few days before they discharge, have them bring all the art they made, a timeline of their whole life, and I would have them tell their whole life story. And
Wow.
I don't know if you know much about trauma, but trauma can impair memory. So can addiction.
Mm-hmm.
So it's like they had their mnemonics. They had art that reminded them of important key events in their life. And just like a CEO would have graphs to present to the board, they had their own form of graph to tell their life story. And it helped keep them on track and focused and able to like do the work they need to do.
Yeah.
It's really, really fun. So
if somebody encounters a traumatic event and they don't have a therapist like you, what kind of exercises or resources, like what could they start doing to start incorporating this art therapy?
absolutely. Well, they can listen to some of my podcasts on my website. So so it's www.artspeaksoutloud.org, O-R-G. They also can just Google art exercises, but even say The Artist's Way by Julia Cameron, her exercises, a lot of writing, but also art and looking at art, while it's not art therapy, it still helps people. It still helps people a lot. But there are plenty of books out there with lots of art exercises. And in fact, some of my earlier books with Kate have, the first book I did with Kate was Women Who Dream. And that's on my Amazon page. Women Who Dream. And my chapter was entitled Love, Letters, Poetry and Art. And in that, I take people through a step-by-step, every little detail, what to do, how to write a love letter.
Oh, wow.
And while that sounds corny, it's amazing how healing it is.
Yeah. Well, I believe it. So like I had a couple weeks ago, I'm a big journaler, right? And I'm trying to get more into art. I have an 8-year-old daughter. She is definitely showing a natural interest in art. And I always have too, but I never had the time, or it wasn't really encouraged for me as much because I was raised by an engineer and he's like, go do STEM stuff or whatever. Not STEAM, STEM.
Right.
So I did get some exposure. Anyway, so I'm doing more watercolors, but oh shucks, I totally just lost my train of thought. Oh, journaling. Okay, journaling. So a couple months ago, I woke up for no reason, just like incredibly stressed out and just feeling the weight of life's problems to a really high degree. And I remember thinking, well, I'll just journal it out and I'll just say it out. I'll just write it down. Like, I'm feeling stressed. I have no idea what to do about it. No prompt at all, just writing, just a free write, and I really did feel so much better.
Amazing, right?
Yeah, just a few pages.
Yeah.
I
So Yeah, a good person who researches that. Whoops, do we lose each other for a
No,
minute?
I'm here. I'm here. I
Okay.
was getting a call. I forgot to put my
Ah,
phone on airplane mode.
that's all right. Um, uh, John James Pennybaker writes Men Who Confess, but he also writes other books about journal writing and how healing it is.
Wow.
And
Okay.
so he writes about the research behind it.
Hmm.
But there's a whole organization about therapeutic writing online that's so you can find
Okay. You
resources.
can find resources.
Mm-hmm.
That's good. So tell me about your chapter now. So I think you told us a
Okay.
little bit about it, but I think maybe we got sidetracked. So just if you could just hit that one more time and summarize what your chapter about.
Okay. Well, a lot of what I told you is in the
Sure.
chapter, but in more detail. Um, and I even went through my medical records and wrote some things from that about
Yeah.
how I put together the impact. And part of my goal for sharing this story, a story I never really wanted to share publicly, quite
Hmm.
frankly,
Yeah.
was the fact that there's still so much denial about the impact of alcohol on fetal development.
Hmm.
And the fact that it's more common than autism.
Wow. Okay.
That's stunning
Mhm.
when it's entirely preventable.
Yeah. Yeah.
And one of the reasons I put so much detail in my chapter is that there are side effects that we don't think of associated with fetal alcohol exposure, and how, like, my immune system was shot from birth.
Hmm.
That makes perfect sense if you think about it.
Sure.
But and I talk about how what I did to build up my immune system and become less dependent on antibiotics, which
Hmm.
I basically grew up on.
Oh, wow.
So I'm hoping if it helps one person, it'd be worth
Absolutely.
going public, right?
Yeah. I feel the same way because my chapter is about how I almost got married to this really violent
Oh
narcissist, and
my.
yeah, there's a lot of I read something once that like the people pleasers and the narcissists find each other, and so I'm a recovering people pleaser, really getting good at my
Yeah.
boundaries. But in my 20s, I just didn't know any better, and he was so handsome, I just couldn't think, and then I'm pregnant, it's a whole thing. So my chapter is how I finally ran away, and I had to run away when he was at
Oh,
work because he wouldn't let
oh
me.
wow.
It was
Oh wow.
so much like a drama movie, and my best friend drove across the state to get me. I had a
Thank
5-month-old baby,
gosh.
and I left when he was at work, and I put the baby in the car, and I looked that we had a dog too. And the dog was not being fed, or one time I snuck the dog food and I just got chewed out so bad about it. Just the dog was getting beat too. And I remember looking at my 5-month-old and my dog, and I was like, and the dog, I didn't even want the dog, but I was like, well, you can't stay here. Like I would just be like the worst. I couldn't live with that guilt. So I just look at my little, and I have a picture that I go back and I visit a lot, where it's like, my 5-month-old daughter in her bouncy chair, and then the dog, and I'm just like, oh God, okay, it's all up to me now. Let's go and get out of here. And I lived
Oh,
in my best friend's basement for a couple of years. I was, doing the food stamps thing and waiting tables and
oh wow.
just trying to get by. Yeah. And so I, in 2020, early 2020, I was able to buy my own house. And so the whole thing, like, I'm just a homeowner, and now I'm a business owner, and now I'm doing this book deal. Like,
Yeah.
life just keeps getting better and better. But I feel really weird about sharing it too, because in my head, I'm like, oh, it's not that bad. Or like other women had it way worse. Or, me and this person, like, we still live in the same town. And dare I say it, we have an almost amicable relationship now as co-parents. And then I'm
Wow.
like, great, all that's going to go out the window when he finds out he's like in my chapter. I changed his name in the chapter, but still, so many thoughts that come up. And then I'm like, did I imagine it all? Because people like that will always tell you like, oh, you're psycho, or like, you're not smart, or like all these things to like really make you question your own reality. And I'm not, so I, even all these years later, like 8 years later, I'm just like, that really did
Right.
happen, right? And then I have to talk to my friends. And it's like what you said about, you go through traumatic things and you don't have the memory of it, because I'll talk to my friends and I'll be like, am I being dramatic? And they're like, no, Sarah, not at all. This. And I was like, oh, okay, great.
Yeah.
So
We fondly call those reality checks. When you and
yeah.
you fortunately you have a healthy group of friends that are like, oh no, I remember.
Well, yeah, and it's really easy for us to cut ourselves off from our friend group sometimes in those situations. And either our,
Hmm.
an unhealthy partner might want that or demand that, or in my case, I was just so embarrassed that things had gotten to such a bad point. And
Right.
the reason that, when you're talking about, I just want to share this with if one person,
Hmm.
um, if one person finds it helpful, then it's a win. And so, I think
Yeah.
about the person, I think about the woman who's crying in her shower
Hmm.
because the shower drowns out the noise of her crying.
Yeah.
And I think about that deep-seated feeling of like, wow, like the weight of my choices has totally ruined my entire potential. My entire life is ruined. And I was 25 years old holding my newborn baby, thinking just 75 more years and I can just die and this will all be over. And
Oh,
I know
I'm
that's such a
sorry.
horrible,
I'm
even in
sorry.
that moment, I was like,
Yeah.
wow, that's so messed up to think. Like, I should be thinking the world is my oyster, but I just couldn't find a way out. I couldn't even conceive, our lives were so intertwined and the baby and this and like, and then
Right.
what made it even worse is we had a son together who passed away, and it was a medical negligence situation and a really traumatic
Oh,
labor and birth
oh
delivery. And
no.
so I mean, and that's what the lawyer was like, when we finally broke up, the lawyer was a man, and he was being judgmental, like, why would you ever, tolerate that? And everything was still so fresh, so I couldn't hardly speak right. But I really, a lot of it was I remember like that baby was the only thing keeping us together. And then I remember waking up from my emergency C-section, and the nurse had told me the baby didn't make it, which is all a blur, just like you said. Like, I don't hardly remember anything from that
Hmm. Yeah.
couple weeks, months, I don't know. And I remember looking at him and being like, God, this guy is the worst. But he's crying right now. And I felt, obviously I felt like, horrible. And he lost his child too. And I was like, I could walk out of this house, I could walk out of this hospital a single woman, but how could I ever be that heartless? And
Oh.
then, and so, and then it was, oh, of course he's being a jerk. Like, he's grieving. We all grieve differently, which is true, but also it was just such a recipe for a really, 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 really dark time. So I tell you, I could have definitely used some art therapy then. I tell you what, I did not know about that.
Yeah.
But yeah, I didn't journal or anything. I didn't do anything creative. I don't think so. We just kind of survived, and then
But look at how far you've come. And
yeah,
I believe journal writing was probably part of your journey.
it could have been.
So,
Yeah, I didn't
yeah,
journal for a really long time, honestly, but I have journaled consistently, I've journaled for the past 3 years. And my
there you
journal
go.
practice, I would always get really overwhelmed with journaling because I would think, well, do I have to just write down everything that happened today? That's like a lot of things, and I don't have time for all that. So I said, I'll get, those cute little journals that are not a full like 8.5 by 11 size, and I'll just write one page. One page will be what's going on, what's happening, whatever. And then another page will just be a list of all the things I'm grateful for. And that always brings me back to a good baseline.
It
And then
does.
the third page will be, an affirmation that I write. It's a whole page, so it's usually like 25 times. And I kind of, sometimes I go in and out, or sometimes if I did have a really eventful time, I'll adjust it. But I think that's been a way for me to keep it pretty manageable, because then I have about a 10-minute daily journaling practice.
Very nice.
Yeah, and
Yeah.
that's a way to keep it more manageable.
Hmm.
Yeah.
The James Pennebaker's research about journal writing is he uh, had college students in his study, and he had three groups. So one was called the experimental group, and that was the group that were asked to write about a traumatic event and write about the feelings and what happened for
Mm.
15 minutes for 3 days.
Oh.
15 minutes a day for 3 days. That's it. That's not very much time,
No.
right?
Mm-hmm.
One of the control groups, so they could do a comparison, one of the control groups, same assignment, except only to write about what happened, nothing about emotions.
Okay.
The second control group, same 15 minutes a day for 3 days, but only the emotions, not what happened.
Mm.
So the experimental group wrote about what happened and how they felt about it. One other group wrote only about what happened. The other group wrote only about the emotions.
Okay.
And obviously, as one would assume, but it doesn't always, research sometimes surprises us. The group that
Hmm.
wrote about both made progress. They made so much progress
Hmm.
that they had fewer visits to the infirmary on campus that same semester. So in other words, journal writing can actually even help improve your physical health.
Gosh,
Pretty
that's
amazing.
yeah. Oh, recently I saw a reel and this person was talking about bilateral drawing. So
Yeah, that's
she's,
it.
drawing.
That's it.
Okay.
That's what I've been talking about, right?
Okay.
Yeah, a
Good.
little bit.
So
Uh-huh. And what did you learn?
yeah, my daughter, she's a girl with big feelings. This girl is fire and she
Uh-huh.
feels her feelings and they're all over the place sometimes. But
Uh-huh.
we started doing that. We just, a little bit and like I'm trying really hard to do more like
Mm-hmm.
art time and it's
Yeah.
hard with the kid, because then it's makes such a mess and then it's like the
Yeah.
cleanup is just as long as the art. But I know now I know it's worth it. It's
Worth
so
it.
worth it. Um,
And I can help you make it easier. Like you can have one dedicated area with a permanent tarp on the floor so you don't have to clean up.
yeah,
And
sure.
right?
Yeah,
So
that's
you
it.
just a little dedicated area where she
Yeah.
can be messy and it's
Yeah.
okay. It's
Oh,
so because it is a headache cleaning up after painting all the
I
time.
know, and they'll be paint in the weirdest places. I'm just like, oh my god, really? Like we have
Yeah,
cups that are always paint, but
yeah,
would you? So we have a few more minutes. I wanted to make this 30 minutes just to make sure that
sure,
people could, still watch the replay. And I will say, Sylvia Morrison, she was just replying too. She's one of our co-authors as well.
right?
I went with her a couple of days ago, but
Cool.
so I'm glad that we're getting some of our co-authors on here
Me
too.
too.
So I wanted to. You told me on the phone before we talked. You told me about. I think it was your brother, right?
Yes.
Tell us
Okay.
about that. That was a really cool story.
Okay. So I was a neophyte therapist, and this was many years ago. He was very ill. He had we didn't know at the time that he had HIV. So
Oh,
he
okay.
was this was in the 80s, so it was early on.
Hmm.
And he actually lived a long time for someone with HIV at that era, during that
Wow.
era. But he was admitted to the hospital with a brain mass, and they were able to see something on the CAT scan. And it, my brother was always the healthy one
Hmm.
in our family, and to see him suffering was very difficult for me.
Hmm.
But I brought my sketch pad and pencils and crayons and things because we used to draw together as kids and paint together.
Yeah.
So I was very excited. I had just read Bernie Siegel's book, Love, Medicine, and Miracles, one of the first books about alternative medicine.
Okay. Gotta put that on the list.
And he had written about having his cancer patients draw, say, a tumor or a mass as if it's a monster and then shrink it every page. So I said to my brother, why don't we try this?
Hmm.
I thought maybe it would calm his anxiety because he's very anxious. He was stuttering, which he had never stuttered. It was from the brain mass. He'd never stuttered before. His balance was off. He had to hold on to furniture just to get up from his hospital bed to the bathroom. And he was about, I guess, 25 or 6 at the time. He was young.
Hmm.
So I thought maybe it'll help him relax. So he drew the brain mass like a monster. I turned the page. He drew it a little bit smaller every time I turned the page. And then what Bernie Siegel suggested is then the final page is like just a pencil dot. Like, so I closed the book, didn't think much of it, went home, came back the next morning, and he was in the lobby. They were discharging him. The brain mass had gone away. So
In a day. That's cool.
overnight, because I was there at night,
Oh,
overnight, overnight. So obviously, as a scientist, I cannot say conclusively the art had anything to do with the brain mass disappearing overnight.
okay. Yeah, sure. Disclaimer.
Disclaimer, and yet that inspired me to spend the next 35 years of my life or more, 40,
Wow.
studying
Ah,
art therapy.
dang.
because
Oh my.
it was so compelling and exciting, and I was so happy. And because of that, he he lived at least another 5 years, which again in that era was unheard of.
Oh my gosh, that's incredible.
Yeah.
Wow.
So, so
So,
these are the reasons I've never doubted the power of art therapy to heal people. And it's I think one of the reasons for a while I was the one people brought their most damaged referrals, their most difficult clients, because there's a way it can be used to help inspire and motivate and heal people that have fallen through the cracks repeatedly. I mean, some of my clients have failed residential care like 10 or 15 times in residential care.
mm,
So art needs to be in most programs and much more than 1 hour a week. 1 hour a week is not even barely enough, but
wow,
I'm biased.
yeah, no, yeah, but I'm so inspired to make more room for art.
Yeah.
Yeah, I'm so inspired to do that. And there's local organizations in my town. I'm up in Southeast Washington, and there's so many towns here that do that do art classes or art camps or
Mm-hmm.
even library art
Yeah.
events. And
Yeah.
I feel so motivated now to just share and support, and like I said, make space for that.
Yay. That's
Yeah,
exciting,
thank
especially where, in the Northwest, it's not sunny all the time.
no.
Right?
No, it's not.
So
Yeah,
art is a great way to deal with that.
yeah.
And I am preparing through a church here to offer a free workshop for people who lost their homes here in
Oh
Malibu and
my God.
Pacific Palisades. And it and like last time, we'll be asking people to bring, this is so hard to hear, but basically the shards of what they found in the ash of their homes to make art with. And we did that after the Woolsey fires. And I know, I mean, I know it works, but I'll tell you, with such a trauma, a community trauma of such magnitude, even I was holding my breath.
Yeah.
In 2 days, people came in shock and frozen, the autonomic freeze state, and they left 8 hours later, 4 hours each day. At the end of the second day, they were laughing and smiling.
Mm. Oh my God, I'm gonna cry. That's amazing.
So it wasn't a
Yeah.
fix. They were still going to go through a lot of hard times in their
Cool.
recovery.
Yeah.
But what a beautiful, hope-giving experience to remember, oh, I can laugh again. Oh, I can talk about this with my friends while I'm making art. And
Yeah.
and that is one of the things art making does. It helps give you the words to speak about what seems to be totally unbearable.
Mm-hmm.
That it can help give you the words to speak about what is unspeakable.
Mm-hmm.
And that's one of the gifts it brings to those of us who've experienced trauma.
Oh my God, I'm forever changed. These 30 minutes have changed me. And this is incredible, Erica. Thank you so much.
Thank
Um,
you.
where can people go? So you said your website. Will you do me a favor? Will
Mhm.
you, all right, when we're done with this, will you just jot down, put your website and then like the name of you listed a couple of books.
Yeah,
Can you
happy
just
to
send
do
that to
that.
me? And then when I write about when we're done and I write the description for the post, and I can
Great.
say, check out these resources for more because this is life-changing stuff. Life-changing.
Thank you.
I'm so
Thank
excited.
you. You'll
Okay.
find also on my website lots of resources, lots of
Okay.
podcasts like this. In fact, with your permission, I'll put this on my
Absolutely.
website.
Thank you.
And then I'm delighted. And then also books I'm in. I think I've been in 4 or 5 of Kate's books,
Okay.
but I've also been in a lot of other
Yeah.
books and several textbooks. So if people want
Dang.
to be more academic,
Yeah.
then they can look at the more academic
Okay.
science-based research.
Yeah, yeah.
That doesn't appeal to everybody, but there's always one in the
Of
crowd, thank
course.
goodness.
Yeah. That's my sister. My sister's always like, but have you read the literature? And I'm like, no, Elizabeth, I'm just going to do a full moon ritual about it. Like, so I don't need that. I'm the magical girly, but my sister, for sure, she's like, I want to read the studies.
Well,
Uh,
if someone really wants to read the science, the best recent book that's come out is called Your Brain on Art. And it's written by two faculty members from Johns Hopkins University. It's easy to find on Amazon. Your Brain on Art. And it's a wealth of research about all kinds of arts, poetry writing, journal writing, clay, sculpture,
play.
theater.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Oh,
theater, you
yeah.
name it, they've got it all. So,
Dang, we have so much theater in my town, and I actually do know a woman who owns a pottery studio, and I'm just like, oh my God, the
uh-huh,
lights are flashing like crazy right now. Okay, and then the good news is this video will live on both of our Instagrams, so
that's
anyone who
right.
watches after, they'll be able to come and check us out.
Okay,
The book Believe Beyond is coming out on
I
Wednesday in
know.
2 days. So make sure you get that. We will be sharing links. I definitely will be. Hopefully you can get that exactly on launch day. So without further
Great.
ado, Ericha, I just want to say thank
Thank
you so much. I'm forever
you.
by these stories. And I'm so excited to go out and share this and make time for art. I really am.
I'm delighted.
Okay.
Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you. I'll see you on Wednesday for launch day.
Thank you. Thank you. Thank you
Yeah,
so much. Okay.
Ericha.
Bye-bye.
Bye bye.
Bye.